All right, you have now got a good start on your Hammurabi's Code Was It Just essay. We're moving on to English, so we're going to switch to the English Google Classroom. You can close the tab of your Hammurabi's Code Was It Just essay. You're going to find the narrative writing story, open it, and inside you will find your story document. You'll see here that I also posted a revising and editing at home lesson. I'm going to go through that with you right now as you begin to work on your final drafts. I'm going to use Alejandra's as an example. She was working on it a minute ago, and I was commenting with her, and she told me it was fine for me to use hers to look at some of the formatting and things on your story. All right. First of all, when you are editing and revising, I'm going to use this little slideshow here. You've got to notice that editing and revising are two different steps. Editing is the process of selecting and preparing work used to convey information, and it can involve correction of errors, condensation, that means bringing together items to make things a little bit shorter or more concise, organizing, things like spelling, punctuation, grammar, making the work accurate. That's all under the umbrella of editing. Revising is different. Revising means to see something again, looking at it from a new perspective, rethinking your writing. This is where you might want to read your story aloud to yourself to hear how it sounds. You want to make sure you're being descriptive and that your descriptions make sense. You want to make sure that the sentence structure you've used makes sense and that you've used complete sentences. And of course, you've used vivid words, not stale wording. We want to use vivid and exciting words and describe all of the nouns. I encourage you to look at the rubric that I'll be using to score your paper. A 5 here on the rubric means you're performing above grade level. It means you're performing at an advanced level. A 4 means you're doing just fine. You're performing on grade level. A 2/3 means it's in progress. You're learning, you're moving forward. And then finally, a 1 means you did not complete the assignment or there were serious problems. Take a few minutes, look over that rubric. If you'd like to see it yourself, I have it posted in the Google Classroom. It's posted right here in the editing, revising, checklist, and scoring rubric. All right, I'd like you to have your story open, and I'd like you at the same time to be going through this editing and revising checklist with me. So if you'd like to, you can make my tab go behind and have your story in the front while I read through the different parts that you're going to look at on your story to make sure you've got it correct. Or you can do split screen. To do split screen, you're going to pull this tab with my video off and let it go, and then resize the screen, moving it around so that it fits on the page. You can do split screen like this. And then on the other screen with your story that's written, resize it. And you can see how I'm grabbing it and moving it around and squish it over so that you can see both my screen and your story at the same time. Let's see if I can do that. All right. I'm going to let you pause the video for a moment while you go ahead and do the split screen. All right. I am going to pause my video for a moment while I open another document. All right, hopefully you've gotten to a place where you are split screen. On one side, you can see your story. On the other side, you can see my video. I'm going to go through the editing, revising checklist here with you, and I would like you to be able to look at your story and see if you have all the items. You want to make sure you have a proper heading, including the class, the teacher's name, your name, and the date. I can see here that Alejandra has her title right in the middle of her date and my name, and that can make things a little bit complicated. It's nice if you can put that on its own line. So instead of doing all these tabs, we're going to use our handy dandy right tab stop and make sure sorry about that. Make sure your date's over there. And then after the date, hit enter and your title can go on its own line. Of course, we can center that. Looking good. In your title, you want to make sure that the words in the title are all capitalized. Okay, so proper heading. That's one of the things I'm looking for. A title. 1-inch margins. That means that the space between your words and the edge of the page is set at 1 inch. Unless you have done something with these margins at the top to mess them up, everybody's should be default to 1 inch. If your words are like going off the page or if they're way over, you need to get some help and reset your formatting so that you have 1 inch margins. It says a readable, appropriately sized font. I would like you to leave the font alone. You can do Times New Roman, or I think it defaults to Arial, and the size should be 11. Keep it at 11. And we want it to be double spaced. And so if yours is not double spaced, you can select your document, come to spacing, and choose double, which we have already done. Now we're looking at organization of the story. Is there a clear beginning, middle, and end? So you want to make sure that it's obvious what's happening in your story, that there's a story there at all. You want an interesting opening to the story. You want to make sure that in the beginning of your story, you've introduced a character and you've described who the character is, and you've introduced the setting. You've described what the setting is like, and I can see both of those things here. You want to make sure your story has some kind of a conflict or a problem, and that the events are clearly described. I encouraged you to have your characters make at least 2 attempts at solving their problem. If you're finding your story is too long, this one's getting pretty long, then you might want to reduce the number of attempts to 1 attempt and then have the problem become solved, because we want this to be a short story. It needs to be, I'm shooting for no longer than 1 page front back or 2 pages total. Make sure you've used transitions to lead the reader into the next event. For example, I'm looking for some transitions here. Later that day or further down the path. And don't forget, in the History Google Classroom, I've included a set of transitions, and some of those might work. They are more for essay writing, but you could use some of them. And that you want some kind of an ending that actually wraps up the problem. Check your content. Make sure there's enough information given to the reader to understand the characters and visualize the setting clearly. We want to make sure the plot is fully developed and the story shows how the character attempts to solve the problems multiple times. Check that your sentences are complete. Make sure your sentences are not exactly the same each time. Remember the large brown front door? That was too repetitive. We need to change and vary our description and use more interesting words. This is a big one. We want to make sure that the point of view is consistent. If in this case, Alejandra is talking about she leapt and Emerald walked down the street. So this is a narrator telling the story. It's called third person. I don't want you to switch into first person in that case. Switching to I leapt into the water and we. We need to stay in either all third person talking about someone else or all first person talking about I and we. We want to use dialogue correctly at least once. And I see Alejandra's used dialogue multiple times correctly here. Correctly means every time there's a new speaker, you hit enter, go to a new line, and indent. Additionally, you'll use quotation marks at the beginning and end of whatever the character said. And we're going to introduce who said it and how they said it. One mistake I see here is that the comma needs to go inside of the quotation marks, not outside of the quotation marks. Always include the punctuation inside of the quotation marks. Otherwise, the way Alejandra's punctuated her dialogue is perfect. She put something the character said, then she stated who said it, how they said it, a comma, and then you finish the thought. I like the way she's being descriptive here. She didn't say that Nightmare said this. She sputtered it quickly. Emerald didn't say it. She yawned. So try to avoid saying said if possible. That can get a bit boring. I'm going to let you look through the rest of this checkoff sheet because my video is getting a bit long and I'm afraid it's going to cut off. Be sure to check your spelling under tools. You can check your spelling here. Be sure that you're sure you want to accept. Okay, my video is about to get cut off, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it now and I'll make a second one for you in just a moment. Actually, I was almost done, so I'm going to wrap this up now before it cuts me off. I just want to say, please spend your time really going through this editing and revising process. I don't want you just to say, hey, I'm done, and turn in what you had. Spend some time, make some changes, improve your writing. and I will continue working with you when we get home.